Good to have you back on the channel. I want you to really focus on this picture. Over here on the left, we have a local science teacher, a pillar of the community. On the right side, a masked abductor brandishing a firearm. At first blush, these two look like total opposites. However, authorities discovered something less than 2 miles from where it happened that might erase that distinction entirely: a solitary black glove tossed in the ditch. It looks frighteningly identical to the budget equipment used by the assailant. At the same time, the FBI knocked on Tommaso's door for a 6th visit, walking out with an enigmatic paper sack. Could the matching glove be in there? We have spent 10 days arguing about whether those eyes look familiar. But right now, we are done with hunches. I am measuring Tommaso Cioni against our masked suspect using 5 critical overlaps law enforcement has to address. Believe me, the facts are way more chilling than you might expect. Let's dive straight into the first and maybe most solid piece of this puzzle: the $100 abduction setup. As soon as online detectives and digital sleuths started enhancing that high-definition porch footage, they noticed a bizarre detail. This individual was not decked out in top-tier military hardware or the kind of pro gear you see in movies. Instead, I discovered the perpetrator was sporting a generic ski. Mask retailing for around $22, plus a nylon holster going for that identical price at sporting goods shops in Tosin. Even that Ozark backpack with the unique reflective strips is something you could grab during a fast run to a discount superstore. Here is the kicker though. The biggest clue in this getup might just be the hands. The suspect had on black gloves crafted from a synthetic rubber known as nitrile. We are not talking about combat gear here. You typically see these on mechanics, food prep workers, or plumbers because they hold up well against oils and harsh chemicals. A box of 100 runs just $10. It is an inexpensive, throwaway option for a felony that feels incredibly heavy. The following sequence of events is where this case takes a truly unbelievable detour. Right when the hunt for Nancy was hitting maximum intensity, detectives spotted some black gloves tossed on the shoulder of the highway. Location is everything here. We are talking less than 2 miles from Nancy Guthrie's residence, directly on a likely getaway path. They looked nearly identical to the ones in that terrifying footage. But here is the curveball that has the whole community buzzing. That exact same afternoon, Fox 4 crews filmed a stunning scene. The feds had returned to the house shared by Nancy Guthrie and Tommaso Cioni. This was not a debut appearance. Actually, it marked the 5th or 6th time police had descended on that location. The detail that grabbed my attention was seeing agents exit the front door, clutching a brown paper sack of potential proof. Anyone in forensics knows that is a giant warning sign. You have to wonder, why use paper? To put it simply, looking at standard operating procedures for crime scenes, paper is utilized strictly for biological material. If you seal damp items, like a sweat-soaked glove, inside plastic, humidity gets locked in and breeds mold, which essentially devours DNA. Paper lets the item air out, keeping genetic markers intact for the lab. This tells us that whatever the FBI removed from Tommaso's place, they were convinced it held biological traces that had to be safeguarded no matter what. At the same time, we need to examine the guy personally. Based on everything in the case files, Tommaso is painted as a regular, quiet father and science instructor. He is the type of fellow who enjoys cooking pasta from scratch and hunting for wild berries. For an educator teaching biology to 6th graders and doing DIY projects, keeping a carton of black nitrile gloves in the garage isn't just standard. It is anticipated. It is a staple item for anybody who handles messy hobbies or home maintenance. The issue arises when you combine these facts. The outlook becomes grim. You have gloves discovered on the asphalt, only 2 miles out, and you see federal officers exiting the son-in-law's residence with a container designed to preserve DNA. I have begun to wonder if authorities finally secured the connection they were hunting for. If the genetic material from the roadside glove pairs up with the contents of that paper sack, we are past the realm of chance. That is definitive proof. It means the strain on this family is hitting a critical level. Going from a mourning family member to the target of a fifth raid is a massive burden to shoulder. This matters because even though the sheriff keeps insisting there are zero suspects, the tangible clues appear to be shouting a completely different story. From that point on, the whole world is glued to their screens, tracking the detective's every step, just dying to know if that simple brown sack holds the smoking gun we have been hunting for. Now, let's leave the crime scene debris behind and dive headfirst into the cold, hard reality of biometric data. Here is the part where the computer modeling starts to paint a picture that hits way too close to home for the Guthrie's inner circle. Here is the thing. The feds didn't drop that 44-second clip just to spook us with a masked creep. They knew his underlying physiology would eventually tell on him louder than fingerprints ever could. It turns out, video forensic teams have been busy, mining those pixelated seconds for gold, using the entryway brickwork as a ruler to measure everything. Pros peg the guy standing between 5'9" and 5'11". They are capping his weight around 230 pounds, meaning we are hunting for a husky dude, not some string bean. But when you actually analyze his gait and posture, specialists like Susan Constantine noticed he has got a remarkably long trunk paired with stubby legs and wide hips. That is just basic skeletal structure. You can't disguise that kind of anatomy with an oversized coat. Then comes the specific trait that made the whole web hit the brakes. His brows. Blow up those high-res infrared shots, and you can plainly spot them staring out from the ski mask's eye slits. We aren't talking wild or overgrown here. These things are shaped, styled, and kept in check. That points to a maintenance routine you usually don't find in some frantic, run-of-the-mill thug. It screams of a guy who checks the mirror and cares about presentation, someone who blends right into polite society. Maybe the type of fella you would bump into at the supermarket or standing in front of a chalkboard, looking sharp. This grooming detail steers the investigation away from a drifter and points a big finger at a local with an image to protect. And that is exactly why the spotlight swings right back to Tommaso Cioni. According to the dossier, Tommaso is a 50-year-old science instructor with a decade and a half of tenure. But he also moonlights on bass and vocals for an indie outfit named Early Black. He rocks that distinct hipster aesthetic, so the polished look of the suspect lines up beautifully with his public persona. Browse through his personal albums, and you see a guy who keeps himself tidy, matching our intruder's vibe. But we really need to discuss the eyes. Witnesses describe the suspect as having large, dark, almond-shaped peepers. Online sleuths instantly tag them as familiar, which makes sense since our brains are hardwired to identify facial features. Even behind the disguise, those eyes triggered a gut-level spark of recognition for anyone who actually knew the man. Granted, plenty of folks share that build or eye color, but when you stack those biological traits, the list of potential candidates shrinks fast. The fallout showed just how intense this recognition bias is. Barely 8 hours post-release, South Toucan cops stopped a delivery guy named Carlos Palazuelos. They hauled him in for interrogation and tossed his house just because investigators felt his stare was a dead ringer for the guy on tape. A completely innocent man got cuffed and raided. Was that solid police work or a reckless rush to judgment that risks locking up the wrong guy? Does this detail really justify that? Sound off in the comments below. So, while Carlos walked free thanks to a rock-solid alibi, that familiarity bias didn't disappear. It just swung the lens elsewhere. See, Carlos had receipts, but we still haven't seen a verified whereabouts for Tommaso during that 4-hour gap between 9:50 in the evening and 1:47 in the morning. It turns out Tommaso's physical stats line up with the cloud footage analysis almost perfectly. The stature, the heavy-set frame, the hipster grooming, and those intense eyes have the internet mob convinced. He went from grading papers to being an international suspect overnight. Meanwhile, the Bureau is still refining the sketch based on the mouth and the jawline. They think they spotted a mustache, which tracks with Tommaso's recent look. So now, You have to wonder, is this just bad luck, or is the undeniable math of biology about to bury the son-in-law? Bone structure never lies, and grooming those eyebrows was definitely a deliberate decision. Now, investigators are matching every single pixel of that enhanced footage against every snapshot of the son-in-law, hunting for that one smoking gun that could either exonerate him completely or lock him away for good. The stakes here are massive because, in a case with this much visibility, the demand for answers is crushing. It is crucial because as we roll into week 2, those recognizable eyes are going to hang over this case until the truth finally drops. Meanwhile, we need to look past the cheap disguises and store-bought kits to focus on something way darker, the behavioral psychology at play. This is where the facade really starts to crack. It isn't about unmasking a face, but unmasking a mindset. When you view the tape, fear isn't the first thing that jumps out at you. It is the intruder's absolute chill. He isn't sneaking around. He is strolling. He operates with a confidence that crosses the line into pure arrogance. You don't see him frantically checking corners. No nervous looks behind his back. He just walks right up to the lens like he is grabbing the morning paper on a lazy Sunday. That is not how an outsider moves in unfamiliar territory. The next part is exactly why experts like Meenan Kelly and former feds have been buzzing for days. The guy walks up to the camera and doesn't even blink. He doesn't attempt to cover his tracks or hang his head in guilt. Instead, he extends a hand and gives the lens 2 soft, rhythmic taps. Tap, tap. It is such a casual, everyday move like testing a mic or drumming your fingers on a table as you walk through your own den. Simply put, this is the textbook example of what profilers call ownership behavior. In criminal profiling, ownership is a mindset where the suspect feels like they have a legitimate right to occupy that space. He isn't behaving like a burglar in someone else's house. He is acting like the landlord inspecting his property. The issue is, why would a complete random feel that comfortable? This guy showed zero concern for a barking dog or a neighbor peeking through the blinds. He had the porch layout memorized. He knew exactly where that camera lived before he even hit the top stair. He navigated that area with the muscle memory of someone who has climbed those steps at least 100 times. That is when I had to take another hard look at the timeline. Keep in mind, Tommaso Cioni was at that exact house just 4 hours before the wires got cut. He had literally just wrapped up dinner. He had just been playing games with the family. The atmosphere, the scents, and the floor plan were all fresh in his head. So if we buy into the ownership theory, the intruder's actions start to make a terrifying amount of sense. When you are in a spot you know by heart, your subconscious drives the bus. You don't creep around. You move on autopilot. That rhythmic tap on the lens wasn't a tactical criminal choice. It was a tick. It is the sort of thing you do to stuff you see daily, like checking a wobbly railing or touching a window pane. This is significant because it implies the person behind the mask wasn't just aware of the layout. They were totally at ease there. They felt right at home in the dead silence of 2 a.m. We also have to talk about the sheer ego on display here. This guy was so sure he was in charge that he took his sweet time covering the camera with leaves like he was doing a chore. He wasn't racing against the clock. He wasn't afraid of getting busted. He acted like he was doing a boring, repetitive job in a safe zone where nobody would bother him. So, who fits that description? Who else has the blueprints of NY's home burned into their brain so deep they could walk it blind without stumbling? Right now, the difference between a random abductor and someone with insider knowledge is impossible to miss. A stranger looks for a way out. This guy was looking for a camera he knew existed. A stranger would be tight, muscles coiled to run. This guy was loose, hands relaxed. Basically, the psychological trail left on that porch is just as unique as a DNA swab. It tells the story of a man who didn't feel like a villain in that moment. He felt entitled. And that might be the creepiest part of the whole thing, Because if this intruder felt he belonged there at 2 in the morning, then we are hunting for someone deeply embedded in NY's life, not a random outsider. The jump from a family dinner at 10 at night to a kidnapping at 2 in the morning is a quick one, but the psychological link between them is built on that exact sense of ownership. Here is why that counts. It proves the guy in the footage wasn't simply an abductor. He was like a phantom returning to a haunt he knew inside out. It is crucial because your subconscious has a way of leaking your routines, even when you are hiding behind a disguise. But now, we have to talk about the most heated part of this whole mystery. This is the wedge driving the internet apart and baffling the pros. And honestly, it is likely the only reason Tommaso isn't sitting behind bars right now. It is the clash between brainpower and performance. Let us break down the perp's moves. Ignore the scare factor for a second and check the technique. The guy looks like a total rookie. The biggest red flag? That pistol holster. Like we mentioned, he is rocking a belly band. That gear is meant to hug your skin under a tee so nobody sees your piece. But this dude? He has got it strapped on the outside of a puffy coat. It is loose. It is bouncing around. It is basically a masterclass in how not to use it. An ex-Secret Service agent noted that nobody with 5 minutes of tactical drill would ever carry like that. It screams, "I do not know what I am doing." Then there is the bag. He is committing a major crime in the pitch black, trying to stay low-key. But he rolls up with a backpack covered in those shiny safety strips that pop whenever a light hits them. It is basically a glowing billboard yelling, "Here I am." Now, stack that against the guy under the microscope, Tommaso Cioni. He isn't some hobo. He is not dumb. He is a 50-year-old educator teaching AP biology. To handle a class like that, you need serious organizational skills, critical analysis, and a grip on cause and effect. You have to be sharp. You have to be rational. That is why his defenders are making so much noise. They claim Tommaso is way too bright to be this sloppy. Their take is that a guy with his IQ would never wear gear that might slip off or a bag that lights up the night. They think the messiness proves he didn't do it. But I want you to flip that logic. Try stepping into the shoes of a genius plotting the perfect heist. If you are a brainy science teach looking to snatch someone and vanish, what is priority number 1? You ensure the cops never glance your way. If Tommaso had approached that house moving like a Navy SEAL, decked out in pro gear and jamming the cams with high-tech gadgets, the suspect list shrinks instantly to pros, military types, or meticulous planners like a science teacher. So, what is the play? You invent a persona. You put on a show. You intentionally grab the trashiest, wrongest gear from Walmart. You botch the holster setup on purpose. You wear the glow-in-the-dark bag to look like a drifter or a clueless newbie. You paint a picture of a disorganized mess, impulsive and uneducated. You want the FBI profilers to gather round and decide, we are hunting a junkie or a neighborhood goon. That way, they gloss over the respected master's degree holder. It is called staging, or more accurately, weaponized incompetence. It is the ultimate cover. It goes beyond masking your face. It is about masking your mind with a disguise of ignorance. And if that was his game plan, we have to face a scary fact. It is working. It is working because we are here arguing about it. It is working because the sheriff is afraid to name him. The amateur vibes cast enough shadow to keep him loose for 10 days. The clumsiness isn't a bug. It is the most brilliant feature of the whole scheme. He is acting the part so well that half the public clears him just because it looks too sloppy for a genius. That implies this incompetence might be the smoking gun. It hints at a manipulation game way deeper than a standard abduction. It points to a brain that knows how cops tick and is playing chess against them. The belly band wasn't a goof. It was a prop. The safety strips weren't an accident. They were a costume. And the guy under the hood isn't dim. He is betting on us being dim enough to buy the act. So I am tossing this to you, 'cause this is the pivot point for the whole mystery. What is your take? Was the abductor truly clueless with that gun? Or was he a mastermind playing dumb to throw us off? Drop your verdict in the comments. Because if this is an act, it is one of the riskiest stunts we have ever witnessed. Heading into our last weird detail, we'll see that even the most brilliant schemes drop a breadcrumb trail that no amount of performance art can hide. Meantime, you can't overlook the chronology. In any detective work, time is the one witness you can't bribe. And for Nancy Guthrie, the clock is spinning a very specific yarn. Per the Pima County Sheriff's official log, Tommaso Cioni dropped Nancy off and pulled away at 9:50 p.m. Someone killed the Nest system manually at 1:47 in the morning. That leaves a gap of exactly 3 hours and 57 minutes. Let's call it a solid 4 hours. Now check the map. Thomas and Annie live less than 4 miles out. And in the dead of night with zero traffic on those Tucson streets, you're looking at a 10-minute drive, tops. 4 hours is practically an eternity when you're committing a felony. That's plenty of time to head home, play it cool, wait for the block to quiet down, and swap into that generic dollar store disguise we talked about. He could drive back, park a few streets over, hike to the house, do what he came to do, and be back under his own covers before dawn. The schedule doesn't give him an alibi. It hands him an opportunity. And this matters because of the digital footprint that dropped next, the Bitcoin bait. Early on, rumors started flying from places like TMZ that there was a ransom demand for $6 million in Bitcoin. It sounded like some huge, high-level hostage deal. But when detectives and local stations took a hard look at the actual blockchain ledger, the truth was way off. No $6 million move happened. Just a single transfer of under $300 hit that wallet. Analysts on Megyn Kelly's show called this tickling the wire. It's a digital mousetrap. The FBI likely wired that $300 not as a payoff, but as a ping. They're monitoring that wallet 24/7, waiting for one slip-up, the kidnapper logging in to check the balance. The second anyone checks to see if the cash landed, their device screams out a signal. It gives up an IP address and a physical location. Now, if a cartel or a pro-crime ring did this, they wouldn't sweat it. They'd have complex ways to wash the crypto, mix the coins, and cover their trail. They'd move the funds instantly. Instead, that wallet has been stone-cold silent, zero movement. That tells us the guy on the other end is shaking in his boots. He knows it's a setup, or he's too frozen to act. Which brings us right back to our high school science teacher theory. Consider the tech savvy you need for this. The suspect knew enough to kill the Wi-Fi camera. He knew how to generate a Bitcoin wallet stuff a science geek would get. But he wasn't sharp enough to know the camera had already pushed that ghost image to the cloud before he pulled the plug. He didn't realize that just peeking at a Bitcoin balance could bring the FBI to his doorstep. This is what we call the middle ground of competence. It's not some Luddite who can't use a smartphone, but it's not a dark web hacker either. It fits an educated guy. Like a teacher, someone who knows how gadgets work, but has no clue how police hunts work. That dormant wallet points to a lone wolf who's way out of his depth. He's smart enough to set the board, but now that the feds are playing, he knows any move gets him caught. So when you look at that 4-hour gap, don't just see blank time, see the logistics of a local guy with a 10-minute drive. And when you stare at that empty crypto wallet, don't just see a failed payday, see a suspect educated enough to be a threat, but too amateur to collect. That specific knowledge level steers us away from random gangs and points straight at a guy with a master's degree, sitting in a house the FBI keeps tossing. The timeline tracks, the geography makes sense, and the digital footprint or lack of one fits Tommaso perfectly. He had the time, the location, and just enough tech skills to cause this stalemate. As we head to the wrap-up, you have to ask yourself, are these 5 random flukes? Or a pattern pointing in one clear direction? But that's where we have to pump the brakes and be totally fair. As strong as the case against the son-in-law looks, and as much as the evidence seems to be tightening around him, we can't ignore the alternative. In true crime, tunnel vision is fatal. If we step back and ask if it's not Tommaso, who else fits these 5 chilling coincidences? Now we arrive at a suspect profile that is just as chilling, though the cause is entirely distinct. We are looking at the profile of a stalker. To be precise, we are dealing with a mental condition called erotomania. It is a delusional state where the subject is convinced that a specific person, typically a celebrity or someone high up on the social ladder, harbors intense romantic feelings for them. In this scenario, the fixation isn't actually on Nancy Guthrie, but rather her well-known daughter, Savannah. The issue is that Savannah is basically inaccessible. She is over at NBC, insulated by top-tier security squads, locked down entry points, and a daily routine that removes her from the public grid. To an obsession-driven pursuer, she is a castle with the drawbridge up. However, her mom, Nancy, was an 84-year-old lady residing solo in a sleepy suburb. Through the twisted reasoning of a predator, Nancy represents a soft target. She is the proxy. She is the easiest route to reach the true focus of his desires. Adopting this perspective flips the script on how we view the intruder's actions, especially that sense of dominance and belonging we touched on before. When the guy strolled onto the porch and gave the camera a tap, it might not mean he had physically visited 100 times. It could simply be that his delusion convinced him he was already part of the family unit. He didn't shy away from the lens because, in his warped mind, this wasn't a break-in. He was just walking into the life he felt entitled to. That relaxed swagger came from a delusional claim over the residence, not knowledge of the blueprint, which circles us back to the groomed brows. Why would an abductor bother plucking his eyebrows right before a major crime? Because he views this as his big debut. He is walking onto a platform where he knows Savannah is the audience. He is prettying himself up for her benefit. He aims to look sharp, maybe even handsome, because he frames this as a grand romantic sweep or a rescue op, not a kidnapping. He isn't a goon. He is a boyfriend in waiting. This also clears up the confusion about his amateur gear. If we are dealing with a stalker, he probably isn't a hardened felon. He is a superfan who hit up a sporting goods shop for the bare essentials. A $22 mask, a budget holster, and a reflective pack simply because that was what his wallet or access allowed. He carried the firearm incorrectly because he lacks training. He likely purchased it just to feel tough or safe. That awkwardness isn't an act. It is the real ineptitude of a guy motivated by obsession instead of a paycheck. This is crucial because it explains why that Bitcoin wallet has sat untouched. If this were a pro job for cash, those funds would be in transit. But for a stalker, the finances mean nothing. He isn't chasing $6 million. He craves the spotlight. He wants to be noticed. That sheds light on why ransom letters went to TMZ and news stations rather than starting a quiet negotiation with the relatives. He is leveraging the press to talk straight to Savannah. Every news banner and national TV plea from the family fuels his fantasy that they are now connected. That sense of influence is worth way more to him than any crypto coin. So, even though the hard clues point toward the son-in-law, the psychological profile suggests a lurker in the dark. A guy convinced that snatching the mom is the key to finally getting the daughter to look his way. And honestly, a volatile stalker on a fantasy quest is often way riskier than a relative with a bone to pick. After combing through every video frame and every detail of the police log, we arrive at a major fork in the road. Down one path, you have Thomas Cioni. You have a guy burdened by 5 damning coincidences that are getting impossible to overlook. There is the identical build, the carefully shaped brows that match his perfectly, and that possessive attitude of someone tapping the lens like it was his own front door. We are looking at the contradiction of a smart science teacher dressed up in a disguise of ineptitude, plus a schedule with a 4-hour hole big enough to conceal a major crime. Then, down the other path, is the specter of an unknown entity. We have the hypothesis of the fixated stalker. This is the chaos element, the notion that an outsider could slide out of the darkness, enact a weird ritual for a single spectator, and disappear into thin air. It is a scary thought because it implies total randomness descended on a peaceful house in Tucson. But we need to focus on the proof staring us in the face. What really stood out to me was the shot of that brown paper sack being hauled out of Thomas's place by the feds. In the realm of crime scene forensics, a paper sack is never just a bag. It isn't for garbage. It isn't for paperwork. It has one specific function: preserving biological evidence. It is constructed to permit airflow so moisture doesn't ruin the genetic material inside. That plain brown pouch is a vessel for undeniable facts, separating a mere hunch from a hard conviction. Should that package hold the remaining supply of nitrile gloves identical to the stray one on the street, or maybe a proof of purchase for a $22 balaclava from a nearby athletics shop, then every rumor about drug gangs and obsessives crumbles immediately. The whole puzzle vanishes when hit with one stark reality. This item could be the final nail in the coffin for Tommaso Cioni, or his ticket to freedom. That is the detail I can't shake. If Tommaso truly is the figure behind the disguise, we are dealing with a split personality that defies logic. How does a devoted dad and respected educator face the press cameras, comfort his sobbing in-laws, and perform as the grieving family member while keeping a kidnapping setup in his shed? How do you keep it together while knowing Nancy's location? It implies a level of cold-heartedness that is scary to imagine. But we have to ask the difficult question. Is our judgment clouded by what we expect to find? Do we see a monster in Tommaso just because he was the last soul to see her breathing? Are the connections real, or is our brain just desperate to find a pattern in the chaos? When law enforcement says there are no suspects, is it protocol, or are they hinting that we are totally off base? Is it possible that while we study a teacher's expressions, a real predator watches from the dark, laughing at our distraction? The veil has not fully dropped yet, but the floor is definitely shaking. As you stream this, that black glove from the roadside is likely sitting on a stainless steel lab table. Forensic teams are harvesting sweat and cells to build a profile that deals in facts, not opinions. With the glove under the microscope and that bag in custody, I think the truth is inevitable. The convenience story is falling apart, and science is about to hand down a sentence that no actor can bluff their way out of. So, I am passing the magnifying glass to you guys. You have seen the clues. You have noted the 5 strange parallels. What is your verdict? Is this the dark saga of a relative whose sloppy disguise tricked the public but failed the lab test? Or is this the handiwork of a stalker, a dangerous shadow figure waiting for another opportunity? Post your analysis and ideas down below. I will be going through all of them to see where you land. Nancy Guthrie is still gone, and until she is back, we will not stop digging. Thanks for hanging out, and I will see you in the next one.
The chilling disappearance of Nancy Guthrie isn't just another true crime mystery. It's a profound, heartbreaking wake-up call for all of us. It forces us to confront a terrifying reality. The true monsters in our world rarely look like monsters. Sometimes, they wear the reassuring smile of a respected teacher, a beloved family member, or a trusted pillar of the community. This tragedy teaches us the perilous difference between perception and reality. We are naturally wired to trust the familiar, to feel completely secure in our quiet suburban homes. Yet, darkness often hides right in plain sight, perfectly masked by ordinary routines. Whether a crime is born from the cold, weaponized incompetence of an insider or the warped, silent obsession of a stalker, it shatters our illusion of absolute safety. Let this harrowing story be your mandate for vigilance. Hold your loved ones a little tighter today. Learn to trust your gut intuition when something just feels off, and never ignore the subtle red flags in your daily life. The pursuit of justice isn't just for law enforcement, it is our collective duty. We must look out for one another, fiercely protect the vulnerable, and relentlessly demand the truth, no matter how much it hurts to uncover.